He was the only general to ever defeat the Muslims on the battlefield, then became the very man who saved them. A warrior who never lost a single one of his 50 major battles. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the breathtaking story of one of history's most legendary commanders, Khalid ibn al-Walid. Think about the sheer paradox here. He was the literal architect of the early Muslims' most devastating defeat. But then, he transforms into their absolute greatest savior. We're talking 50 major battles, 0 defeats. That's a track record that literally rivals or even beats Alexander the Great. So how on earth does a guy go from ultimate enemy to ultimate champion? Let's get into it. Part 1. The Tactical Genius of Uhud. So we're kicking off our timeline in 625 AD, before Khalid actually converted to Islam. He was this young, incredibly talented horseman, raised in the aristocratic Banu Makhzum clan of Makkah, a clan basically famous for its wealth and sheer military muscle. And to really grasp his raw tactical brilliance, we've got to look at the Battle of Uhud. He commanded just 200 Meccan horsemen against a disciplined 700-strong Muslim army. The odds completely stacked against him. But Khalid had this rare, razor-sharp tactical eye. It was like he was looking at a chessboard from above, just waiting for the exact perfect opening. And here's how it played out. The Muslim army was actually winning the day. But then, thinking the battle was basically over, the Muslim archers abandoned their high ground to go collect the spoils of war. Khalid spots his vulnerability instantly. No hesitation. He leads this lightning-fast cavalry charge all the way around the mountain and slams right into the exposed rear of the Muslim lines. It was a devastating flanking maneuver. It completely shattered the Muslim ranks and even nearly killed Prophet Muhammad himself. The real takeaway here? This single, highly calculated move showed the terrifying potential of a commander who could literally flip certain defeat into an overwhelming victory. This was the only serious battlefield defeat the Muslims suffered during the entire Qurashi War, and it was 100% because of Khalid's vision. Moving right along to Part 2, the birth of the Sword of God. So after the peace treaty of Hudaybiyyah, Khalid travels to Medina and makes a massive, life-altering decision. He embraces Islam, and his very first major test, fighting for his new faith, an absolute crucible of fire. It's 629 AD, the Battle of Mutah, near modern-day Jordan. The Muslim army is completely surrounded. They are vastly outnumbered by heavily armed Byzantine Roman forces and literally on the brink of total annihilation. One by one, all 3 of the appointed Muslim commanders are martyred in combat. Complete chaos is setting in. How do you save a broken army in that situation? Well, someone had to step up. And, you guessed it, that someone was Khalid. The strategies he pulled off here are just mind-blowing. First off, he launches this desperate, lightning-fast strike against the Roman flanks just to stall their momentum, buying his guys some desperate breathing room. Then, under the cover of night, he totally reorganizes his broken army and pulls off a masterclass in psychological warfare. He breaks his forces into small, separate groups and orders them to march back into camp at different times the next morning, kicking up these massive clouds of dust. To the exhausted Byzantines, it literally looks like endless waves of fresh Muslim reinforcements were pouring in. The Byzantines panicked, they retreated, and Khalid managed to pull his army out of certain death. And this is exactly why, when he returned, Prophet Muhammad bestowed upon him the honorary title, Sayf Allah, the Sword of God. That title cemented his legend forever. He was no longer the guy who broke the Muslims at Uhud. He was now the ultimate protector of the early Islamic State. Which brings us to Part 3, the Genius of the Desert. Fast forward a few years. The Prophet has passed away, and Khalid has been instrumental in unifying Arabia and conquering Sasanian Iraq. But right in the middle of this massive success, he gets an urgent order from Caliph Abu Bakr. Drop absolutely everything and march to Syria to help the faltering Muslim armies against the Byzantines. To get there in time, he had to pull off something that historians today still call impossible. He force-marched his army across 500 kilometers of the brutal, entirely waterless Syrian Desert, and he did it in just 6 grueling days. You've got to wonder, how do you even survive a desert with 0 water? Well, it was a grim but honestly genius logistical puzzle. Before they left, Khalid forced his camels to drink massive amounts of water. Then, he actually had their mouths bound shut so they couldn't graze and spoil the water sitting in their stomachs. As they marched, he slaughtered the camels one by one along the route, harvesting that stored water from their stomachs to keep the horses and his men alive. Thanks to this completely unmatched endurance, Khalid and his men emerged directly out of a wasteland that the Byzantines thought was entirely impassable. By popping out from this impossible angle, he totally outflanked an entire empire. It allowed him to concentrate his forces and strike the Byzantines exactly where they were the most vulnerable.
All right, part 4, the masterpiece at Yarmouk.
We're now in 636 AD. Khalid is facing a massive Byzantine coalition at the Yarmouk River. And it's right here that his tactical genius hits its absolute peak, all thanks to his use of the Tulaya Mutaharrika, or the mobile guard. Now, traditionally back then, cavalry was spread out across the line. Not Khalid. He took his absolute best, battle-hardened veterans and centralized them into an elite striking force that he kept completely under his personal command. They were basically a rapid response unit, darting across the battlefield to wherever they were needed most. When you look at the military philosophy of the two sides, the difference is just stunning. The Byzantine cavalry was kept in this rigid, static reserve. They just lacked the flexibility to exploit any breakthroughs. But on the flip side, Khalid's mobile guard was highly maneuverable. They shifted rapidly to plug up defensive gaps or totally shatter an exposed Byzantine flank the second they saw an opening. And he paced this massive 6-day battle with incredible surgical precision. For the first 4 days, it's a grueling defensive hold. But then, on night 5, he makes a massive play. He sends a commander to capture the vital western bridge, the only escape route out of the valley for the Byzantines. Boom, cut off. Then, on day 6, Khalid goes on the full offensive. He masses his cavalry, violently drives the Byzantine horsemen completely off the field, and leaves their infantry utterly exposed and trapped down in deep ravines without any cavalry support. The result? A devastating absolute rout. This decisive victory at Yarmouk destroyed the last effective imperial army in the Levant. It effectively ended centuries of Byzantine rule in Syria forever. This one triumph served as the brilliant blueprint for all future conquests, pushing the Islamic State way beyond the Arabian Peninsula and right onto the global stage.
Now for the conclusion, the final order.
But, history is rarely simple. Right at the absolute pinnacle of his fame, having literally toppled empires, Caliph Umar suddenly issues a shock order. He relieves Khalid of his supreme command. Why? Well, neutral historians point out this wasn't about petty personal drama. Caliph Umar had a very strict theological fear. Khalid was so successful, so seemingly invincible, that the people were starting to place their ultimate trust in Khalid's undefeated streak, rather than in God. But what's truly incredible here is Khalid's reaction. He displayed unquestioning obedience. The sword of God stepped down without a single word of protest. This man who had conquered entire empires just calmly handed over his heavy commander's standard. He willingly accepted a demotion to serve as a simple soldier under the new commander, Abu Ubaidah, and he just kept fighting brilliantly in the ranks. It proved once and for all that his devotion was strictly to his faith, not to his own personal glory or ego. And he and Caliph Omar actually maintained a deep mutual respect right up until the very end. In 642 AD, the unstoppable Sword of God finally passed away. But surprisingly, it wasn't on the battlefield amidst the clash of steel. He died peacefully, in his bed, in Homs, Syria. And as he lay dying, he famously and honestly tragically mourned this peaceful end. He wept, saying that he had sought martyrdom his entire life. He lamented that there was literally not a single spot on his body, not even a handspan, without a scar from a sword, a spear, or an arrow. Yet, after all that, he was denied a soldier's death, dying in a bed like cattle die. It is such a profound thought to end on. How does a warrior covered in scars, a guy who conquered empires and never lost a single battle, leave an even greater legacy in his humble submission than in his unsheathed sword? It really reminds us that Khalid ibn al-Walid's truest victory wasn't just his tactical brilliance over the Byzantine and Persian empires. His ultimate victory was his complete surrender to his faith. Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.